The printer jammed again. Same rattling click. Same red light blinking like it wanted an audience. I leaned over the Xerox tray and dug out the mangled expense report, its corner still sticky from the last intern's latte spill. There was something weirdly permanent about that printer smell. Burnt toner, hot plastic, and frustration. Just across the open floor, I could see Deb from payroll already peeking over her monitor to see if I'd fix it. I always fixed it. That's what I did. I fixed the jam. I stayed late. I trained the temp, who ghosted midweek. I remembered which gluten-free snack packets went in which bin. I knew when Greg's kids had swim meets and when our CEO's mother had her dentist appointments, because someone had to know. I wasn't anyone's boss, but I was always the one who stayed after the boss left, and I'd been doing it for 9 years. My name's Aaron, 39 years old. I work at a mid-sized logistics software company outside of Des Moines. Not glamorous, but stable. Or at least, I thought it was. Until 3 weeks ago. Until my boss, Scott, leaned against the edge of the conference table after our quarterly performance reviews and said the quiet part out loud. "You're just too reliable, Aaron. You hold things together too well. I can't promote you without creating a hole somewhere else." Then he gave my job to a contractor named Damon. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what led up to that, and how I went from thinking I was the glue to realizing I was just the duct tape they never planned to keep. It started on a Tuesday, not a dramatic one. No storm clouds or pink slips, just a regular Iowa morning, a little gray around the edges, with the smell of someone's forgotten breakfast sandwich still hovering in the hallway. I'd been at my desk since 7:45. Even though my official start time was 9. That was habit by now. I liked the quiet before the floor filled up. I liked the way the fluorescent lights flickered to life one by one, like I was waking the office up myself. By 8:30, I had already cleared out the team support inbox, flagged an issue in our API logs, fixed the labeling error in our Q3 dashboard, and restocked the paper tray in the printer room because I noticed it was low yesterday and nobody else would. That's when I got the email. Subject: quick touch base, 10 a.m., just one line in the body. Let's connect on where things are headed long term. Scott. No emojis, no smiley face, just where things are headed. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who spirals over vague wording. But something about that phrasing sat weird. It wasn't performance review season. It wasn't project transition time. And Scott wasn't a let's connect kind of manager. He was a catch you in the hallway guy. Still, I brushed it off. I buttoned my cuffs, wiped my glasses clean on the edge of my undershirt, and reminded myself I was the longest standing person on our team. Promotions had been slow lately. Maybe this was the pivot point. I'd trained 4 product associates, 2 QA leads, and 1 junior project manager. I'd taken over coordination after Cynthia left for maternity leave. I wasn't flashy, but I showed up. 10 o'clock came, and I walked down to Scott's office, knocking twice on the frame. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his screen. He gestured to the chair with a pencil. We talked about my hours, my consistency, my institutional knowledge. Then he said the line that changed everything. "You're too reliable to move," Scott said. "If I promote you, who replaces you? No one can do what you do as cleanly. You're like the foundation, man." I blinked. "Isn't that the point?" I asked. "To promote someone who's built the foundation?" Scott looked pained, like I'd missed something obvious. He launched into a metaphor about gears and machines and how pulling the wrong cog disrupts the engine. I only half heard it. My ears started to ring around the part where he said, "We're bringing in a contractor to take on the new client-facing projects. Someone agile, with startup chops." Agile. Startup chops. I felt like I was being swapped out for an espresso machine. When I got back to my desk, I sat in my chair for 10 full minutes, staring at the login screen of our task manager, forgetting my password. Damon showed up 2 days later. He was 32, wore Allbirds, and spoke in acronyms. KPI this, OKR that, MVP, UX, GTM. He had the haircut of a guy who paid someone to mess it up on purpose, and the confidence of someone who thought brown bag lunch meant you were losing at life. He had a desk 2 rows down from mine, and he made a big deal of introducing himself. "Hey, Damon, they brought me in to steer the ship on the client side. Heard you're the guy who keeps the engine running?" It wasn't a question. It was a line, like we were in a buddy cop movie. I smiled politely and said, "I'm Aaron." He kept talking. "Scott says you're the guy to talk to if I get lost in the weeds. No worries, though. I like a little chaos. You don't mind if I make some changes to the playbook, do you?" That word again, playbook, like we were playing a game. Over the next week, I watched Damon undo 3 systems I'd spent 6 months refining. He turned our client escalation map into a color-coded Notion board, introduced an AI ticket triage bot that misfiled everything, and swapped out our product tutorial script with one he found more conversational. He didn't ask, he just announced, and every time I flagged something that didn't work, he smiled like I'd just proven his point. "See, that's why you're critical. You catch everything. You make the messy stuff disappear." I did, until I stopped. That Friday, I stayed late. Everyone else cleared out by 6. Damon had a founder happy hour downtown. Scott ducked out for a charity thing. The lights dimmed, and the hum of the vending machine was the only sound left. I opened a blank document and started listing every system I'd quietly maintained without official ownership. Customer onboarding flow, error escalation logs, holiday coverage plan, patch scheduling calendar, resource library indexing, vendor renewal dates, 47 line items, 47 invisible roles I'd absorbed so no one else had to think about them. Then I opened our shared drive and checked who'd touched the most critical ones. No one. Not Scott, not Damon, not even the junior project leads. I thought about closing the document, about going home, about letting it go. Instead, I gave it a name. Operational Risk Audit, Unassigned Dependencies, Internal. Then I added a timestamp and sent it to Scott. No explanation, no summary, just a quiet reminder that some gears don't squeak when they go missing, they just stop turning. The next morning, I got a calendar invite. Subject: coffee, Monday 8 a.m., just you and me. I didn't sleep much that weekend, not because I was nervous, but because something cracked a little in me. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was wake. The coffee tasted like burnt cardboard. We met at a place 2 blocks from the office, a half-hearted attempt at neutral ground. Someplace where nobody from work would overhear, but close enough that I could still feel the fluorescent buzz of the office hanging over us. I'd never seen Scott in a booth before. He looked out of place, like a guy who'd borrowed someone else's weekend life for the morning. He didn't waste time. "Got your document," he said, sliding his phone face down on the table. I waited. He nodded slowly, like he was about to give me a eulogy instead of a response. "Listen, I knew you were holding a lot, but seeing it written out like that? Damn." Still, I said nothing. I wanted him to talk first. Let him fill the silence with what he wasn't saying. "So here's the deal," he continued, leaning forward like this was some war room strategy session. "You're not wrong. You've been covering a ridiculous amount of ground. Stuff that technically falls outside your job description." Technically. That word again. He stirred his coffee, even though there was no cream in it, just for the motion. "I owe you an apology for not seeing it sooner." I raised an eyebrow. "You saw it. You just didn't care until it became a liability." Scott winced. He was always a guy who looked like he played high school baseball just long enough to remember the pep talks, but not long enough to realize nobody cared. Corporate coaching lingo rolled off him like sweat: bandwidth, scalability, culture fit, high value pivot. Now he was squirming in a vinyl booth because someone had shown him a mirror. "You're right," he said, "and I want to fix this." "I do." I waited again. He reached into his bag and pulled out a manila folder, actual paper, which felt weirdly theatrical. He slid it across the table like a detective presenting evidence. "Project lead," he said. "Temporary title adjustment. Same base pay. But we add a 5% quarterly bonus for transition oversight. Think of it as a bridge roll while we restructure." I opened it. The words were there. My name, a new title, a few bonus clauses, and a line that made my stomach sink. Duration, 6 months. Role terminates upon final handoff to client operations lead. "You're giving me a temp title," I said, "to train the guy who's replacing me." No, not replacing," he said quickly. "Complementing. Damon's handling client growth strategy. You're stabilizing operations as we expand. It's a dual track." I closed the folder. "You ever promoted someone by giving them an expiration date, Scott?" He didn't answer that. Back at the office, the vibe was off. I don't mean some grand betrayal music playing in the background. I mean that subtle shift, like when a room gets cleaned by someone else and you can't quite find where your mug went. Damon had taken over the whiteboard. Literally, he erased my sprint sequence and replaced it with something he called a velocity map. It had arrows, emojis, and a next to every third column. Our team's workload was now represented by stickers. He slapped me on the back as I passed his desk. "Yo, big congrats, man. Scott looped me in. Lead role, huh? Told you had gravitas." I didn't respond. I just sat down and reopened my terminal. Something in me clicked that morning. Not anger, not pride, precision. I started documenting, not just tasks, but patterns. Who pinged me for what? Which problems Damon accidentally triggered, and who came to me to fix them? I created a shadow changelog, time-stamped and categorized. System undone. Issue flagged. Solution restored. 3 days in, I had 47 entries. By Friday, it was over 80. And then something happened I didn't expect. One of the junior analysts, Lex, approached me during lunch, her salad container still half sealed. "Hey, weird question," she said. "Did we used to have a shared directory for patch release notes? I can't find it since Damon moved stuff." I nodded. "Yeah, it's archived now. I'll send you a backup." She hesitated. "You didn't hear this from me, but he told Scott it was never a thing, that we didn't track patch notes in the old system, but I use that thing every week." I smiled, just a little. "Thanks for telling me." I added her note to my log. System denial by replacement. Direct contradiction by staff. Scott checked in again the next week. Quick Slack message. Real casual. "Hey, how's the transition feeling?" I replied with a link to the changelog and a single line. "Depends what story you want to tell." No emoji. No passive smile. I watched as the scene indicator popped up under his message. Then nothing for 10 minutes. Then a response. "Let's connect tomorrow. Can we keep this internal for now?" That's when I knew something had shifted. He was trying to get ahead of it. Internal. That word echoed. The next morning, HR sent out a company-wide update. "Excited to welcome Damon Parker as our new client operations lead. Please direct all client escalations his way effective immediately." There was no mention of me. No line about special thanks to Aaron for his transition leadership. Not even a CC. I kept the message open on my screen for a full minute. Then I opened a new tab, logged into our documentation system, navigated to the section labeled Legacy Workflows, Aaron Roth. And I started removing my name, not out of spite, out of clarity. If I wasn't worth naming, I wasn't worth anchoring. That night, I stayed late again. The office was empty except for the hum of the exit sign and the faint tick of the thermostat. I wrote a new document, title, System Fragility in Client Operations, Transition Risks. I outlined every point of failure I knew Damon wouldn't catch, every undocumented edge case, every vendor rule that only existed in my memory, every informal workaround I'd created over the years to keep things running. At the top, I wrote, "This document is for Scott only. Do not share without context." Then I scheduled it to send Monday at 8 a.m., right before the company's weekly stand-up. Then I walked out without turning off the lights. Let them see what gets left behind when Reliable leaves the room. Monday started with rain. Not the dramatic kind, just a persistent drizzle that made the sidewalks feel slimy and the inside of your sleeves damp no matter what coat you wore. I got in at 7:15, not out of obligation, out of habit. Still. The document I scheduled went out at exactly 8 a.m. I watched the outbox just to be sure. Subject: System Fragility in Client Operations. Transition Risks. To Scott Rayner, CC, none. I didn't need a read receipt. I knew he opened it. His door stayed closed until 10. No shoulder taps. No hallway passes. Just the faint sound of his mouse clicking and the occasional scrape of his chair shifting against the floor. The stand-up was at 11. And this time, Scott came out early. The Monday team stand-up usually took place in the central conference room. Glass walls, half-broken blinds, and one dry erase marker that never worked. 27 people packed into a space meant for 15. No chairs unless you arrived early. I stood in the back. That was my spot. Always had been. Damon walked in wearing one of those tech-branded vests that people in San Francisco swear by even when it's 80 degrees out. He carried his phone in one hand and a cold brew in the other. He didn't nod to me this time. Something was off. Scott cleared his throat at the front, holding a printout. I recognized the title immediately. My document. He didn't say it was from me. Didn't need to. "Before we start," he began, "I want to highlight something that came to my attention this morning. Some operational concerns flagged around our transition strategy. I'll be reviewing this with leadership this week." Damon shifted next to him, just slightly. Scott didn't look up. "For now, please don't make any changes to client escalation processes without written approval. That includes Damon's new flowchart for the onboarding sequence." Half the room turned to look at him. He smiled, wide and theatrical, like it was all part of the plan. "All good," he said, too casually. "Iterate and adapt, right?" But his jaw twitched. I noticed. So did a few others. The message was clear. Pause the handoff. But it was too late to roll everything back cleanly. Damon had already scrapped several of our legacy tracking tools and replaced them with new dashboards no one had fully tested. He'd deleted old templates thinking they were dead weight. Some of them were tied to automation scripts that now fired blank emails to clients when certain triggers hit. I waited, not to gloat, not to say, "I told you so," but because I knew what came next, and it did. Wednesday morning, Lex messaged me. "Hey, client onboarding email didn't trigger properly. Client thought we ghosted them. Damon said it's a known glitch. Is it?" I typed, "Nope." The script was tied to the old folder. When he deleted it, the webhook lost its target. 10 seconds later, he told them it was a vendor issue. Another beat. Just FYI. I added it to the log. Then I made a copy of the change log in my personal drive, just in case. That Friday, I had a check-in with HR. Routine, they said, just a pulse check. Marcia from HR wore her usual expression, equal parts gentle concern and bureaucratic anesthesia. She smiled as I sat. "Hi, Aaron. Just checking in on how the transition is going. You've been in a hybrid support role lately. How's that feeling for you? I didn't answer immediately. She waited. I said, do you want the version that looks good in a spreadsheet, or the one where I explain how we've let someone dismantle core systems based on aesthetics? She didn't flinch. Off the record? She asked. I nodded. I think you've been put in a difficult position, she said, and I think the language used around your role was unstrategic. Unstrategic, I almost laughed. But, she continued, we're trying to create room for both evolution and institutional knowledge. It's a balancing act. I leaned forward. Do you know how many times Damon has asked for clarification on something I built? 18 times in 3 weeks. Do you know how many times he's credited me for solving those clarifications? She looked down. I don't. 0, I said. He treats my documentation like a cheat code, then rewrites the credit screen. She nodded slowly. Would you be open to a lateral move? Somewhere your experience is better matched? That's when I realized they weren't fixing it. They were moving me out of the way. That night, I went home and opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside, my old freelance client list, resumes, certifications I'd never bothered to update because I was too loyal to a job that saw me as furniture. I updated it all. Then I made a new spreadsheet. Title: Exit Options, Viability Map, column. A, Company Name column. B, Contact Person column. C, Culture, Red Flags column. D, Health Coverage Match column. E, Remote Flexibility column. F, Transition Time. I filled in 12 rows before I even realized how fast I was typing. It felt good. It felt like control. Back at work, cracks kept widening. Damon tried to roll out a new client kickoff form that missed 3 legal compliance boxes required in 5 states. Legal flagged it, and Scott called an emergency huddle. I wasn't invited. Lex messaged me from the hallway. Scott's asking where the original compliance checklist lives. Do I give it to him? I said, only if they plan to document it properly this time. Otherwise, let them rediscover it the hard way. She didn't reply right away. Then, this is a mess. I wrote, I know. And that was the first time someone outside of management said it aloud. By midweek, a ripple effect started. People began quietly asking me for the old ways. Lex, Jared from QA, even Annie from finance. Not because they were resisting change, but because they wanted to know the truth beneath the shiny dashboards. One afternoon, I saw Damon in the break room giving a little speech to 2 interns. Something about redefining the role of middle layer operators. When I walked in, one of the interns, Sarah, asked me flat out, Hey Aaron, did we used to track cross-state client issues with a live triage queue? Damon interrupted before I could speak. We're sunsetting that, he said quickly. Too bloated. I met her eyes. It worked, I said. It worked really well. She nodded, then looked at Damon, then back at me. I knew what was coming. It wasn't going to be a dramatic firing, not some big takedown, just a slow fade out, a reallocation, a soft landing. So I did one last thing. I booked a private meeting with Scott. No subject line. Just, need 15 minutes before Friday. He accepted. We met in his office. Door shut, no laptop open. He waited for me to speak first. I held up a folder. No frills, no branding. This is a full record of what's been lost, corrupted, or misrepresented in the last 30 days, with names, dates, and examples, not for revenge, just for accuracy. He took it. I'm not staying, I said. I'll give you 2 weeks. I'll even document the handoff right. But I'm not staying in a place where reliable is a synonym for invisible. Scott didn't argue, just sat back. After a long pause, he said, You know, you were never supposed to be invisible. We just got too comfortable. I stood. That's the problem. My resignation didn't cause a scene. It wasn't one of those movie-style walkouts where someone flips over a desk and everyone slow claps as they exit the building. It was quieter than that, almost surgical. But that didn't mean it went unnoticed. By the end of that day, I had 3 unread messages from coworkers. One from Lex. Are you seriously leaving? Or is this like a sabbatical? One from Jared in QA. Please tell me this isn't because of Damon. And one from Annie in finance. Scott looks like someone unplugged his router. What's going on? I didn't reply to any of them right away. I needed space. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't sure how to answer. It wasn't just about Damon. It was about a pattern. The way certain companies wrap you in phrases like mission critical and indispensable, only to keep you chained to the same chair for a decade. The way they applaud your reliability, but never your ambition. My mistake wasn't being too reliable. It was believing that reliability would eventually be rewarded. Over the next 2 weeks, I did exactly what I said I would. I documented every system I'd built, every workaround, every silent rescue, every calendar trigger that lived only in my head. I left behind a playbook, not for Damon, but for the next poor soul who might get dropped into this with no context and too much to prove. I also left gaps, intentional ones, not out of pettiness, out of realism. Some things can't be written down. They have to be felt, lived, paid attention to. No SOP can teach you why a particular vendor always delays invoices on Thursdays, or why certain clients go radio silent unless you call at 8:58 a.m. sharp. That was the part they never understood. Damon once asked me why I didn't just automate myself out of a job. I told him, because some jobs aren't supposed to be automated. They're supposed to be earned. He laughed. I didn't. On my last Tuesday, HR called me in for an exit interview. It was Marcia again. She offered me tea this time. I declined. Let's start with the basics, she said, clicking her pen. Why are you leaving? I paused, then answered, because I finally realized I'm not stuck. She scribbled something down, nodded once, and moved on to the next question. Is there anything we could have done to make you stay? I almost said no. Then I reconsidered. Yeah, I said. You could have promoted me when I earned it. You could have told me I was more than just convenient. And you could have stopped treating ambition like a threat. Marcia didn't write that one down. She just looked at me, quietly. The day before my last, I got a calendar invite. Farewell cake, Aaron. Thursday, 3:30 p.m., break room. I almost laughed. Cake, for the guy they sidelined. But I showed up, not out of politeness, but because I wanted to see who else would. Lex was there, arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. Jared brought a card that said, "Thanks for all the invisible stuff." Someone, probably Annie, ordered a lemon bundt cake from the good bakery, not the vending machine kind. Damon didn't show. Scott did. He stood near the back, paper plate in hand, looking like he wasn't sure whether to speak or just blend into the carpet. Eventually, he cleared his throat. I just want to say a few words, he began. Everyone turned. Aaron's been with us for nearly a decade. He's been the glue. And I'll admit, sometimes you forget to thank the glue. I stared at him. He continued, but we've all learned a lot from you. About ownership, about foresight, about what it means to hold things steady even when no one notices. We'll feel this absence. I raised my plastic fork. To absence, I said. Quiet, dry. Some people laughed. A few winced. Scott didn't. That night, I cleared out my desk. No fanfare, no speeches. I boxed up the mug Lex gave me back in 2018 that said, "Now one low-key MVP." I wiped down my monitor, shut off the terminal, and left my ID badge on the corner of my keyboard. I thought I'd feel rage or vindication. But what I felt was stillness, and a kind of private pride. Not because I'd burned anything down, but because I didn't let myself rot quietly inside the walls of a company that mistook endurance for consent. 2 weeks later, I got a message from Lex. Damon's velocity map crashed a client sprint. Compliance is ticked off. No one knows who owns what. Then another. They're asking if you'd be willing to consult part-time, clean things up. I sat with that one for a while, then typed back, happy to help, at my rate. She replied instantly, what's your rate? I smiled and doubled what I used to make. When Lex's message came through, I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee that actually tasted good for once. It was a Tuesday, 2 weeks to the day since I'd left, and the morning light was spilling across my kitchen counter like it had finally decided I wasn't on the clock anymore. I stared at her message longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to ignore it. The other part, the part that had spent 9 years keeping other people's trains running, was already planning a solution in my head. Old habits don't quit easily. They just get quieter. I typed back, let's do a 30-minute call tomorrow. Then I set the mug down and smiled to myself. It felt strange, being wanted again, but on my own terms. The next morning, the call started late. Scott was there, looking 10 pounds lighter in stress and 10 shades paler in pride. Damon was on mute, pretending to read notes. Lex looked like she'd slept in the office. Hey, Aaron, Scott said. Appreciate you taking the time. Things have gotten complicated. I saw, I said. Lex gave me a preview. He rubbed his temple. Some of the automations Damon implemented broke client reporting pipelines. We lost 2 accounts last week. Which ones? He hesitated. Next Freight and Lambert Logistics. I nodded. High-maintenance clients. Those were fragile systems. They relied on staggered API calls. Damon rerouted them to synchronous. Damon unmuted for the first time. That shouldn't matter. The system should still... I cut him off calm. It does matter when the server load spikes and times out, which it did, which you didn't test. He stared. Scott shifted uncomfortably. So, Pam, I continued, what exactly do you need from me? Scott exhaled. We're not asking you to come back full time. We just need a short-term consulting engagement to stabilize operations, clean up the transition. I smiled faintly. At my rate, he nodded. We can approve that. Damon's face twisted. You're paying him to fix what we're already fixing? Scott shot him a look that said, yes, quiet. That was the moment I realized the power had flipped. They needed me more than I needed them. The next few weeks felt almost poetic. I wasn't back on payroll. I wasn't clocking in early. I wasn't the too reliable guy anymore. I was the consultant, the one who sent invoices with terms, the one who said, let's circle back next week, and actually meant next week. Damon still tried to posture in meetings, but now he had to copy me on every decision. Every time he said, we can push that live, I'd raise an eyebrow and ask, did you validate the vendor compliance string? He'd fumble, every time. It wasn't revenge. It was confirmation. Proof that reliability isn't weakness. It's infrastructure. One Friday afternoon, Lex called me privately. They're finally realizing how much you did, she said. Scott's talking about rebuilding the old escalation framework. I laughed. He'll rename it something fancy. He already did, she said. He's calling it the Roth model. I paused. For the first time in months, I didn't feel bitter. Just done. Let him, I said. Just make sure you get the credit for maintaining it. She smiled. You taught me how. That meant more than the rate. By the end of the quarter, my contract wrapped. The systems were stable again. Clients were happy. Damon's contract quietly expired, and his name disappeared from the team roster the same way mine once had. Scott sent me one final message. Thanks again, Aaron. Not sure how we let things slide like that. You got a standing offer if you ever want to come back. I typed, appreciate it, but I'm good where I am. Then I logged out. These days, I freelance from home, a few clients at a time. Good ones. The kind who pay for reliability because they understand what it's worth. Sometimes, when I close my laptop after a long call, I catch myself still waiting for someone to tap my shoulder, to ask for one more thing, one more favor, one more quick fix. No one does. That's when I know I'm free. Because being reliable doesn't mean staying where you're not respected. It means showing up, doing the work right, and knowing when to walk away. And the funny thing, once I stopped being everyone's safety net, I finally started building something of my own. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.